we respect human rights. And what was shocking about Kim Jong-il and Kim Il-sung is that
are being victimized, sometimes sold for as little as $200.
North Korea exists as a nation whispered about in hushed tones. Images of tightly controlled parades and a stoic, enigmatic leader fill our minds. But what truly happens behind that tightly sealed border?
North Korea was already one of the most secretive countries in the world.
In today's video, we have a rare chance to pierce the veil of secrecy. A North Korean defector has stepped forward, offering a first-hand account of life under one of the world's most repressive regimes. What will they reveal? What secrets will they expose? Prepare to be shocked. The perilous journey of North Korean escapees. An estimated 31,000 North Koreans have dared to chase a new life in South Korea since the Korean War split the peninsula in the 1950s. This perilous journey, often undertaken in secret and filled with danger, typically involves crossing the heavily guarded border into China and then finding a way to a third country that will allow passage to South Korea. The number of defectors reached a high point in 2009, with nearly 3,000 people escaping the clutches of North Korea's repressive regime. However, since Kim Jong-un took power in late 2011, he has tightened border controls significantly,
North Korea was already one of the most secretive countries in the world,
leading to a sharp decline in the number of defectors. The reasons that compel North Koreans to risk their lives for a chance at freedom in the South are as numerous as they are heartbreaking. Poverty, a harsh reality for many in North Korea, pushes some to seek a life with greater economic opportunity. But even more pervasive is the stifling repression that defines life under a totalitarian regime. North Korean defectors often carry with them harrowing tales of limited freedoms, constant propaganda, and a pervasive sense of fear. Their stories paint a picture of a country where basic human rights are routinely disregarded. And so, driven by a desperate yearning for a chance to escape the oppression that permeates every aspect of life in North Korea, these individuals embark on a harrowing journey. Their stories are chilling accounts of endurance, filled with perilous hikes through dense jungles, treacherous river crossings under the cover of night, and the constant fear of being captured by North Korean border guards, a capture that could mean imprisonment, torture, or even death. The emotional toll is immense. Many defectors are forced to make agonizing choices, leaving behind loved ones under a regime that views escape attempts as a betrayal of the highest order. They grapple with the agonizing uncertainty of their family's fate. Are they alive? Will they ever see them again? These are questions that hang heavy on the hearts of countless North Korean defectors. In 2010, a brave woman named Mi Hyang managed to escape North Korea and reach South Korea. Her escape was fueled by the fear of persecution. Her family was accused of treason, for reasons she could not explain, but this wasn't the only ordeal she had endured. Before fleeing, she revealed that she had been forced into a unit known as the Pleasure Squad for 2 horrifying years. So, what exactly is this Pleasure Squad, and what horrors did it represent? The Pleasure Squad. The Pleasure Squad, or Kipumjo, began during the era of North Korea's founder, Kim Il-sung. Despite his passing in 1994, Kim Il-sung remains eternally revered as the nation's leader. It was during the late 1970s, at the apex of his authority, that emissaries were dispatched across the land on a mission to seek out young women and girls to partake in roles as singers, dancers, and even maids. However, the most striking among them were handpicked for a more dubious duty, to serve as comfort women for influential officials. Many of these girls were as young as 13 or 14, and some were sometimes recommended for this disconcerting service by their own schools. Kim Il-sung's selection process specifically targeted virgins, as he purportedly believed that intimate relations with them would enable him to harness their life force, or Kai. The girls' parents were told that their daughters were going on a special mission to serve Kim Il-sung, and they couldn't say no. Once chosen, the girls lived in the big mansions of powerful people, where they had to do whatever they were asked. without question. Once these girls are recruited, they are divided into different groups. One faction specializes in performing arts, such as singing and dancing, while another focuses on therapeutic practices like massage therapy. But there's a darker side to it all, the manjakjo. This group's main job is to provide services. After Kim Il-sung's death, his son Kim Jong-il continued the pleasure squad tradition. He had his own harem of mistresses, and rumors suggest others in the Kim family partook in the exploitation of these girls. One shocking story comes from Kenji Fujimoto, a sushi chef who worked for the Kims between 1989 and 2001, claimed that Kim Jong-il's brother, Jang Song-taik, held auditions for girls during his reign. According to Fujimoto, if they were singers, they would sing right there. Additionally, there would be separate auditions for dancers, where the panel would ask them to raise their legs. Fujimoto also stated that in order to get the auditions, girls would have to get intimate with Jang Song-taik first. Jang Song-taik's story didn't end well. His own nephew, Kim Jong-un, saw him as a problem and ordered his execution. It was brutal. He faced a firing squad, and then his body was burned with flamethrowers. Mi Hyang's experience in North Korea's pleasure squad. Very few details about the pleasure squad's operations have reached beyond the confines of North Korea's secretive communist regime, and what little has surfaced is nothing short of chilling. Now let's delve deeper into Mi Hyang's account. Mi Hyang recounts her recruitment into the pleasure squad at a tender age of 15 while she was still attending school. She vividly describes the selection process, where female students underwent scrutiny, leading to the identification of candidates like herself. These chosen few were subjected to exhaustive assessments, including detailed examinations of their family background, academic records, and physical attributes. Height played a curious role in the selection criteria, with those exceeding 165 centimeters being deemed unsuitable due to Kim Jong-il's stature. Moreover, candidates were expected to possess unblemished skin, soft and feminine voices, and undergo rigorous medical evaluations. From the pool of applicants nationwide, approximately 30 to 40 students were annually shortlisted, with an additional 15 males chosen to serve as farmhands or household aides to Kim Jong-il. Upon selection, recruits embarked on 6 months of intensive training before facing the ultimate interview with Kim Jong-il himself, who held the power to approve or reject them. Successful candidates were granted the opportunity to serve until the age of 25, at which point they were obliged to retire from their duties. Before meeting Kim Jong-il, Mi Hyang recalled a surreal ritual where she was required to make a pledge of allegiance using blood drawn from her finger. Creepy, right? Once in the service of Kim Jong-il, strict rules governed the lives of the servants. Communication with their families was forbidden throughout their decade-long service, further isolating them within the confines of their duty. Unmasking North Korea's elite lifestyle. In a tell-all memoir published during his exile, Lee Il-nam, a nephew of North Korea's founding leader Kim Il-sung, offered a glimpse into the secretive world of the pleasure squad. Lee's account painted a vivid picture of extravagant and hedonistic parties that unfolded within the confines of Kim's Pyongyang residence. These gatherings, according to Lee, were fueled by an endless flow of alcohol and culminated in increasingly intimate acts as the night wore on. Lee described a typical party as a whirlwind of activity, with guests indulging in a seemingly endless feast. Laughter and music filled the air as people danced and conversed freely. However, there was a darker side to these festivities. As the night deepened and inhibitions lowered, the games began. One particularly crude game involved a competition, with the loser facing a humiliating penalty. Lee recounted how the unfortunate soul deemed the loser would be forced to shed an article of clothing, piece by piece, regardless of their gender. This punishment, Lee noted, was equal opportunity. Men and women alike were expected to comply, no matter their station or status. Lee also wrote about another game that sounds even more startling, a hair-shaving challenge with a distinctly personal twist. In this game, intoxication likely played an even greater role, as participants would gamble with their most prized possessions, their hair. For men, losing meant having their head shaved in a harsh, almost military-style buzz cut. But for the women, the stakes were even higher. Lee alleged that women who lost this game would have their pubic hair shaved, a violation of privacy, and a form of humiliation that is difficult to comprehend. Lee himself was murdered in 1995. Surviving the supreme leader. Mi Hyang's story was unlike anything that had been ever heard before. It wasn't just about serving a dictator, it was about a glimpse into the strangely personal life of a man shrouded in secrecy. We learned that Kim Jong-il, the former iron-fisted leader of North Korea, wasn't just a ruthless tyrant. According to Mi Hyang, he had a surprising sentimental side, even shedding tears after a few drinks. But that wasn't all. Mi Hyang also revealed some of Kim Jong-il's peculiar tastes. His favorite food was something most of us wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole, a delicacy containing the reproductive organ of sharks. His living arrangements were also as extravagant as his tastes. Apparently, he wasn't content with just one palace. Mi Hyang described a network of private residences scattered around the capital, some featuring an unbelievable amenity, a personal 50-meter-long underground swimming pool. It conjured up images of a life of opulent seclusion, a hidden world where the leader could indulge in his hobbies away from the public eye. However, Mi Hyang's account also highlighted the contradictions in Kim Jong-il's personality. While he could be surprisingly sentimental and even cared for by his female attendants, he was also known to have a fiery temper. As mentioned before, Mi Hyang's time with Kim Jong-il took a sudden turn when her family was accused of treason, the gravest sin imaginable in North Korea. And for this, the punishment was execution. But in a twist of fate, Kim Jong-il intervened. He specifically ordered that Mi Hyang be spared. We can only imagine the confusion and fear she must have felt during this time. One moment she's serving the leader, the next her family is facing death, and then a reprieve. But for what reason? Well, despite the close relationship she had with the former leader, Mi Hyang insisted their bond was never romantic. It was shortly after this ordeal that Mi Hyang made her daring escape. Perhaps the threat to her family was the final straw. Or maybe she simply couldn't stomach the thought of continuing her service under such circumstances. One last detail Mi Hyang revealed was the origin of her name. Apparently, the leader himself deemed her original name to Countryside Girl and bestowed upon her the name Mi Hyang. This seemingly trivial fact spoke volumes about the absolute control Kim Jong-il and his successor exerted. They could influence not just the people's lives, but even their identity. From disbandment to renewal, the Pleasure Squad met its demise in 2011 with the passing of Kim Jong-il, ushering in a new era under his son, Kim Jong-un. Rumors swirled that Kim Jong-un harbored a deep distrust for his father's inner circle, extending even to the women and girls of the Pleasure Squad, who held intimate knowledge of his father's regime. Fearing the potential revelations from these women, orders were issued for them to return to their hometowns with strict instructions to keep their lips sealed. It was a covert operation, with each woman reportedly receiving hefty payoffs totaling around $4,000. This was a fortune in the impoverished landscape of North Korea. As a further incentive to maintain silence, they were given electrical appliances, serving as both a reward and a means of ensuring their discretion. For 4 years, the halls of the Pleasure Squad remained empty. Then, in 2015, whispers began circulating in South Korea of Kim Jong-un's clandestine efforts to resurrect the Pleasure Squad, this time with a fresh cohort of recruits handpicked for his own pleasure. It marked a resurgence of the secretive institution, signaling the enduring influence of power and desire in the isolated corridors of North Korea. A daring escape. Now, let's turn our attention away from the chilling story of Mi Hyang and the horrifying Pleasure Squad. Instead, we'll take a look at the harrowing escape and revelations of another defector, a man known simply as Mr. Kim. Understandably, Mr. Kim prefers to keep his full name out of the media for the safety of his family, both in Seoul, his new home, and back in North Korea, the country he desperately fled. Mr. Kim's escape from North Korea was a story ripped straight out of a heart-pounding thriller. Unlike most defectors who attempt the dangerous trek across the heavily fortified border with China, Mr. Kim, determined to protect his entire family, dared a different path: escape by sea. This wasn't just him. He carried the hopes and fears of his pregnant wife, his elderly mother, his brother's family, and even the memory of his deceased father, whose ashes he carried in an urn. The year was 2023, a time when North Korea had become an even more isolated hermit kingdom. COVID had sent shockwaves through the regime, leading them to slam their borders shut and sever trade ties with the outside world. This move effectively choked off the trickle of defectors who had previously managed to escape the oppressive state. But Mr. Kim wasn't one to be deterred. The night they set sail was a night carved by chaos. Fierce winds howled from the south, whipping the sea into a frenzy. This wasn't a stroke of bad luck. It was part of Mr. Kim's gamble. He hoped the treacherous conditions would force any patrolling North Korean vessels to retreat, giving them a window of escape. This escape wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. For years, the yearning for a life beyond the Iron Curtain had gnawed at Mr. Kim. He had spent months meticulously planning every detail, every contingency. The success of the escape hinged on these plans. The most heartbreaking aspect of the escape involved Mr. Kim's brother's children. Too young to understand the gravity of the situation, they were gently coaxed into a deep sleep with carefully measured doses of sleeping pills. Under the cloak of darkness, Mr. Kim and his brother shouldered the responsibility of carrying the children across a treacherous minefield. Each step was a silent prayer. Each breath held tight as they navigated the darkness, avoiding the probing beams of the guards' searchlights. Reaching the prearranged location on the coast was just the first hurdle. Now they had to get on the boat without attracting attention. His brother's children were carefully tucked away in old grain sacks, their small forms disguised to resemble bags of tools. With pounding hearts, the family boarded the boat. The men gripped the hilts of their swords, a last line of defense against any possible confrontation. The women held weapons of a different kind, small eggshells filled with a potent mixture of chili powder and black sand. This desperate concoction, meant to be cracked open and thrown into the faces of any pursuing Coast Guards, spoke volumes about the lengths they were willing to go to in their quest for freedom. Thankfully, their harrowing journey came to a successful end. They made it. Mr. Kim, forever marked by his ordeal, later revealed shocking details about the life he left behind, stories of starvation, oppression, and a yearning for freedom that mirrored his own. Now it's time for today's subscribers pick. So far we have explored the enigmatic world of North Korea before, from the notorious Pleasure Squad to harrowing accounts of life under the regime. But this photo, capturing North Korean leader Kim Jong-un in a provocative pose with a woman, raises questions about its authenticity. Is it a genuine snapshot or an AI-generated fabrication designed to tantalize or manipulate perceptions? If genuine, the image could have significant implications, challenging the carefully crafted image of Kim Jong-un as an austere and unapproachable leader. The mere existence of such a photo could hint at cracks in the regime's facade of control. If fabricated, it shows the power of technology to deceive and manipulate. As the world speculates, one can't help but wonder, what if the dictator's concubine escapes and tells everything in an interview? How might this photo alter perceptions of North Korea's ruling elite? Share your thoughts in the comments section. Starvation and secrecy. After enduring a period of adjustment at a resettlement center specifically designed for North Korean arrivals, Mr. Kim and his family were finally released. It was then that he sat down with the media, eager to share his story and shed light on the harrowing realities unfolding within North Korea. His narrative began with the arrival of COVID-19, a time when fear gripped the entire country. State-run media relentlessly bombarded the population with graphic images of death and illness spreading across the globe. The message was clear. Disobedience to the government's strict COVID protocols would unleash this terrifying virus upon North Korea. These broadcasts were followed by a swift crackdown. A dense web of regulations was implemented and enforced with an iron fist. Any suspected violation, no matter how minor, could result in being sent to a notorious labor camp. The regime's response to the pandemic bordered on paranoia. A single reported case of COVID-19 could transform a bustling village into a ghost town overnight. Security forces would descend upon the area, sealing off the perimeter with barbed wire and checkpoints. Residents were then forced to remain inside their homes, with dwindling food supplies as the lockdown stretched on. Mr. Kim described a particularly disturbing tactic used by the government. After a period of forced starvation, the regime would bring in meager rations, just enough to stave off immediate death. They would then claim to be selling this food cheaply, manipulating the starving population into expressing gratitude for this supposed act of generosity. This blatant exploitation of a global crisis planted seeds of doubt and anger within the people. Mr. Kim spoke of a growing distrust of the regime, with whispers circulating that the harsh COVID measures were less about protecting the people and more about lining the pockets of the elite. However, the most devastating blow, according to Mr. Kim, wasn't the virus itself, but the regime's decision to completely shut down the borders. North Korea had always struggled with food security, relying on imports to supplement their own domestic production. With this crucial lifeline severed, the situation became dire. Prices for basic necessities soared, leaving many families struggling to afford even a single meal a day. The fragile stability that Mr. Kim and his community had known for years began to crumble. He described a noticeable deterioration in the situation starting in the spring of 2022, with reports of starvation deaths becoming increasingly frequent. Mr. Kim reportedly stated that these deaths were a rarity in the past, but by then, news of such tragedies became a daily occurrence. All these revelations are just the tip of the iceberg. There is still more to come, as you would soon find out. From smuggler to survivor, Mr. Kim wasn't one to simply accept the tightening grip of the regime. He possessed a remarkable resourcefulness, a skill honed over years of navigating the harsh realities of North Korea. Before the pandemic, like many North Koreans, he had made a living on the black market. His particular trade involved motorbikes and televisions smuggled in from China. However, with the border closures effectively strangling trade, Mr. Kim displayed a keen business sense by pivoting to a new hustle, buying and selling vegetables. His logic was simple: everyone needed to eat. He adopted the moniker grasshopper seller, a term reflecting the covert nature of his operation. He would sell his wares discreetly from his home or in secluded alleyways, ready to vanish like a startled grasshopper if anyone reported him to the authorities. According to Mr. Kim, his customers were desperate, practically begging him for a chance to buy. This shift in the market dynamics allowed him to dictate his prices. He could charge whatever he wanted, and for the first time in his life, Mr. Kim found himself with a level of wealth he'd never known before. He and his wife could now afford the luxury of stew for dinner, with their choice of meat, a stark contrast to the meager rations most North Koreans were forced to endure. Mr. Kim's narrative painted a picture of a man not just cunning, but one who had learned to navigate the system with a shrewdness honed by years of experience. He spoke of a decade spent hustling and saving, constantly finding ways to outfox the North Korean regime. This resourcefulness, he explained, stemmed in part from a disillusionment that had taken root in him at a young age. Since childhood, he and his father had secretly watched South Korean television channels. Living close to the border offered an unexpected advantage. They could pick up the channels on their set. These stolen glimpses painted a picture of a world vastly different from his own, a world where freedom seemed to exist. As he grew older, the rampant corruption and injustice he witnessed within the North Korean system chipped further away at his loyalty. He vividly recalled a specific incident when security officials raided his home, confiscating his belongings under the chilling pretext that everything in North Korea belonged to the state, including the air he breathed. This blatant disregard for individual rights further fueled Mr. Kim's desire to escape the oppressive clutches of the regime. North Korea's oppressive crackdown. In 2021, a new wave of fear gripped North Korea as the state unleashed powerful crackdown squads tasked with stamping out anything deemed anti-social behavior. These squads, according to Mr. Kim, operated with an air of menace, arbitrarily stopping people on the street and subjecting them to intimidating interrogations. The atmosphere grew so oppressive that the populace began referring to these officials as mosquitoes, blood-sucking creatures draining the life out of society. The most serious offense in the regime's eyes, Mr. Kim explained, was exposure to outside information, particularly the forbidden allure of South Korean culture. For those unfamiliar with North Korea's iron grip on information, it's crucial to understand that all forms of media, radio, television, even newspapers, are tightly controlled by the state. There are no independent outlets, and the content is meticulously curated to promote loyalty to the regime and its socialist ideology. Any dissent or exposure to conflicting viewpoints is ruthlessly suppressed. Mr. Kim described a chilling escalation in this crackdown. The punishment for consuming or sharing unauthorized information, particularly South Korean media, had become much more intense. Those caught faced a brutal choice: execution or a lifetime of backbreaking labor in a notorious camp. In April 2022, Mr. Kim himself was forced to witness a public execution of a young man, barely 22 years old. The crime he committed was listening to 70 South Korean songs, watching a handful of films, and sharing them with friends. The authorities, Mr. Kim recounted, presented this brutal act as a public spectacle, a stark warning to anyone contemplating similar anti-social behavior. They wanted to instill fear, to crush any spark of rebellion before it could take root. A tremor of distress ran through Mr. Kim as he recounted these memories. He spoke of a particular incident in 2022 that served as a final, shattering blow. A close friend, trapped in a loveless marriage, had desperately sought a divorce to pursue a relationship with another woman. However, the unforgiving machinery of the North Korean state had presented him with a horrifying option. They had informed him that the only path to divorce was a stint in a labor camp. Crushed by this absurd and inhumane solution, his friend sank deeper and deeper into debt, frantically searching for an alternative. Ultimately consumed by despair and hopelessness, he made the tragic decision to take his own life. Escaping the darkness, the aftermath of the suicide left an indelible mark on Mr. Kim. Visiting his friend's bedroom after the devastating event, he was confronted with a horrifying scene. The walls were visibly damaged, clawed at with such force that his friend's fingernails had come loose. The physical evidence spoke volumes about the mental anguish that had preceded this desperate act. This discovery shattered any lingering doubts Mr. Kim may have harbored about the cruelty and inhumanity of the regime. He knew then, with a terrible certainty, that he and his family could not, would not, endure such a life any longer. There are many horror stories like that of Mi Hyang, a young woman drafted into a pleasure squad at a tender age, and Mr. Kim, who dared to defy the regime's iron grip. Their harrowing experiences represent just a fraction of the countless untold stories that lie hidden behind North Korea's tightly sealed borders. The country operates under a veil of secrecy, a hermit kingdom shrouded in mystery and oppression. Information trickles out in fragments, smuggled whispers of a reality far removed from the state-sanctioned narrative. Mr. Kim's escape and his friend's tragic demise are mere glimpses into a society where human rights are an afterthought and basic freedoms are a distant fantasy. The world can only speculate on the true scale of the suffering within the country. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.